So, what happens when you mix the hip-hop samurai aesthetic of Samurai Champloo with the black comedy anime style of the Boondocks? Well, you get Afro Samurai. Afro Samurai is many things. It's ultra-violent, super distinctive and stylish, fast-paced, off-kilter, deceptively tragic, and it's bound to leave a strong impression on you whether you like it or not. I first watched Afro Samurai a few years ago, and I was pretty shocked to find out that it only had 5 episodes in a movie that I'm still not sure if it's canon to the actual plot or not. Rewatching it for the sake of this video, I was also pretty surprised by how much I still liked the show the second time around. All of the themes regarding the dangers of seeking vengeance and the heartbreaking moments of the main character Afro's decisions only causing him and the people he cared about more pain seemed to hit even harder than they did the first time around. And I can't forget to mention the great fight scenes that have aged extremely well due to the show's great sense of pacing and amazing art style. Afro Samurai is your typical story about revenge, except it's not actually that typical. The main character is a man simply named Afro, who as a young boy watched his father get killed by a powerful cowboy gunman named Justice. The reason Justice killed Afro's father was because, at the time, Afro's father was the owner of the legendary #1 headband, and based on the lore of the show, whoever wields the #1 headband is said to have the power that rivals the power of God. The only person who can challenge the owner of the #1 headband is the owner of the #2 headband, who was supposed to be the strongest man in the world next to #1. The owner of the #2 headband at the time just so happened to be Justice, and that's why he challenged Afro's father to a fight. Quick little lore dump for you. Something I didn't catch the first time I watched Afro Samurai, and something that, as it turns out, is critically important to the main themes and message of the story, is that as Afro's father lay dying in young Afro's arms, his last words to his son were, "Do not avenge me." We all know the cliche sayings about revenge. It's a double-edged sword. It's like a poison. It hurts the one seeking it out just as much as it hurts the target of it. Blah, 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 blah. But Afro Samurai is one of the best examples of the true drawbacks of revenge that I've ever seen. Literally from the moment the seed of revenge and hatred was planted inside of Afro's heart, his father tried to save his son from the life of empty misery by telling him not to avenge him. But did Afro listen?
No! No!
Afro hears from various characters throughout the show that revenge is not the answer, that the path of vengeance will be a sad and lonely one. But Afro makes the choice to walk that path again and again and again, no matter what the consequences are. He works vigorously and tirelessly to become a samurai of unrivaled strength and skill, all to kill Justice and take his revenge for the sake of his father. The first episode opens by recounting this traumatic event that changed the course of Afro's life, before quickly transitioning into Afro as a grown man and fully realized samurai, who seems to be cornered by a group of thugs who want his #2 headband. It's interesting to juxtapose Afro's desire for wanting to kill the owner of the #1 headband with all of the endless thugs and warriors who want to kill Afro for the #2 headband. Afro doesn't want godlike power. He just wants to avenge his father, whereas all the people who want to kill Afro want the opportunity for power and glory that come with being able to take the #1 headband. Well, all of them except for one, but we'll get to him a little later. In what ends up being a pretty crazy fight sequence that perfectly sets the tone for the type of action the rest of the show has in store, we see Afro easily take down the horde of bum-ass grunts all by himself. But we also see that he is being watched by a mysterious bald man with some strangely high-tech binoculars. More on him and some others in a second too. Before the final survivor succumbs to his injuries, he questions why Afro is doing all of this, because Afro doesn't seem like the type of guy who's out to make the world a better place. As the man collapses to the ground, Afro tells him that,
Nothing personal. It's just revenge.
After this fight, we finally get introduced to the comic relief of Afro Samurai, a loudmouth being known as Ninja, who was played by Samuel L. Jackson. Also, he kinda just is Samuel L. Jackson, like a really turned up and charmingly obnoxious version of Samuel. Oh yeah, Afro Samurai is also played by Samuel L. Jackson, which just shows his range as a motherfucking thespian motherfucker.
Well, I'm a mushroom cloud laying motherfucker.
Sorry, had to do it at least once. When it comes to Ninja, I'm not exactly sure what the deal with him is. It's hard to tell if he's simply a figment of Afro's psyche created from all the traumatic shit that he suffered through, and maybe he represents Afro's repressed and subconscious feelings and emotions, which is what allows Afro to present to the world as a very guarded and emotionally distant person. Sort of like season 3 of Mob Psycho for those who get the reference. But it also seems like Ninja's existence is somehow tied to the #2 headband, and he just follows whoever has it. But I'm not sure sure how true that is, and I'm also not sure if that really explains how or why he ultimately sacrifices himself for Afro near the end of the story. Maybe the answer lies somewhere in the middle, but all I can say for sure is that Ninja is entertaining as f***. And the one-sided back and forth conversations he has with Afro throughout the series are definitely some of my favorite aspects of the show.
Oh, my man, I got to tell you, I don't know if it's your natural pheromones or you need a shower. But assassins are coming at us like flies on hot shit. Got a friend, maybe we can do an orgy, you know, huh? All right. So you ain't the swinging type. All right. Add one more body to the body toe. May God rest this poor bastard's soul. This shit you leave behind you is nasty. That's you, ain't it? You bleeding, bro.
Ninja is critical to the story of Afro Samurai and to Afro the character because whether he's real or not, he's the only consistent companion that Afro has on his journey. All of the real people that Afro cared for and all of the people who once cared for Afro are either dead or have grown to hate him. The only person left at Afro's side is Ninja. So, as annoying as he may be to Afro, deep down, I think Afro realizes that without his presence, he would have truly lost his mind a long time ago. Afro heads into a local town to look for directions of where to find the #1 samurai. After yet again beating the bullshit out of some random tough guys, he gets the directions he was looking for from a bartender and heads up a mountain to fight God. While on his way, he gets ambushed by a weapons specialist who ends up wounding Afro before getting sent to the Shadow Realm himself. Then Afro is ambushed again by a big man with a big sun hat, but due to Afro's injuries, Afro gets knocked down the mountain and falls to what probably should have been his death. Luckily for our main character though, he had the love of a good woman waiting at the bottom of the mountain for him, so he couldn't die just yet. Episode 2 is all about two things. 1. Introducing the second part of Afro's past after his father was killed, and he finds refuge with a samurai master and his orphanage of fellow wayward children. And 2, of course, booty. After he falls down the mountain, Afro is somehow saved and nursed back to health by a beautiful yet mysterious woman named Okiku, but that's not her real name. Okiku's real name is Otsuru, and she was one of the kids Afro grew up with in the orphanage. Afro was always real close with her and her older brother Gino, and we see in the flashbacks and in the present that she's always been pretty fond of Afro. Sometimes a little too fond.
She on my dick.
Okiku nurses Afro back to health, and to repay her, Afro succumbs to his deepest desires, and they end up doing the nasty while one of the most hilarious R&B tracks I've ever heard plays in the background. And while we're on the topic of music, something else I hadn't mentioned yet is that RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan was responsible for the score in Afro Samurai because, of course he was. And a lot of the background tracks are pretty fire, I can't lie, even if some of them are a little outdated now. After Afro and Otsuru do the deed, Otsuru comes clean about her true intentions with Afro, and how she and her brother joined an underground cult/crime syndicate called the Empty Seven, whose goal is to defeat Afro, take the #2 headband so that they can challenge the #1 and achieve godhood for themselves. Their mission statement and goals are all explained pretty hilariously in this tirade of a monologue from one of its members.
We have borne the cross, but we will seize the crown, and the prophecy shall be fulfilled, eye for an eye. #2 shall know no mercy at the hands of the Empty Seven.
I said earlier that Ninja is the main source of comic relief in the show, but I gotta give the Empty Seven a solid honorable mention. These motherfuckers are weird as hell, but they are funny as hell. And they really give the show an extra dimension that separates it from other shows with similar stories and themes. I also have to say that I really love Afro Samurai's aesthetic of mashing up old age samurai with more modern, almost steampunkish style technology. The Empty Seven are the epitome of this aesthetic come to life. The episode ends with Otsuru coming clean to Afro about the Empty Seven's plan and how she was being used to siphon data from Afro's memories to create a just as powerful Afro android. And then promptly she's killed by the Empty Seven for being a traitorous whore. Their words. Afro eventually escapes the situation and continues his journey of revenge. But I do really like that even though Afro is acting as cold as ever after watching his childhood friend, who really could have ended up being his wife, be brutally murdered, Ninja, who I'm sticking with the theory that he's actually just a manifestation of Afro's repressed thoughts, saving a trinket of Otsuru's hair clip and sticking it in Afro's hair for safekeeping. It shows that despite the brutal and unfathomably dark and lonely path that Afro walks, deep down, he hasn't lost his humanity, and he still cares for the people he's hurt on this stubborn quest for revenge. Episode 3 is an interesting one because a lot happens, but in the grand scheme of things, not that much happens at all. The Afro droid that Otsuru's data helped to build is unleashed on Afro, and after a short yet tense battle, he defeats the android clone by being unpredictable. He then goes on to systematically take out the MT7 one by one in a similarly easy fashion. Well, all of them except my guy number 3 here, who just calmly asks for Afro to give up the headband with a peaceful offering of tea.
Hachamaki o kudasai. Hachamaki o kudasai.
But what really makes this episode special to me is that instead of leaving the Afro droid as just a quick one-off fight at the start of the episode, the droid learns from its mistakes, and instead of trying to be Afro, it comes back from the depths of the ocean for a salty run back, this time using all kinds of crazy robo bull to win. And this ends up being arguably the best fight in the whole show. Afro still comes out on top, of course, but I remember this fight ending and I had a lot more respect for the Afro droid. This also sets up the climactic clash between Afro and his former best friend Gino in episodes 4 and 5. From the very start of this fight with Gino, Afro clearly doesn't want to engage with his opponent, and Gino is hiding his face behind a giant teddy bear helmet in this fight because, I don't know. Like I said, this show is weird as hell, but in a really dope way. Because if Kanye West taught me anything, it's that stuffed bears can be cool as fuck in literally any setting if you know how to use them right. But also, don't learn things from Kanye West nowadays. He doesn't seem to be in the best headspace.
I just told you who I thought I was, a god.
But as they fight, the full story of Afro and Gino's connected past is revealed, and we find out that the rift between them all started when, after years of growing up together in the orphanage and learning the way of the sword under their master, it turns out that their master is actually the current owner of the number 2 headband. At this point in Afro's life, he has everything a person can reasonably ask for. He has a family and friends who love, protect, and appreciate him. He doesn't have to worry about shelter or food. He becomes an excellent swordsman and is respected by all of his peers for his skills as a samurai. But he doesn't have the one thing that he cares most about, and that's revenge for his murdered father. It's the only thing that has driven him this far. And upon realizing that his master is the only man he needs to kill to get the number 2 headband and challenge the number 1, he does the unthinkable and challenges his master to a life or death duel. Before their duel can start, Afro and his master's fight is interrupted by a ridiculously large amount of grunts who somehow knew that the duel was happening and also all collectively decided to jump the master at the same time. And of course, all of Afro's fellow orphans show up to watch and inevitably get slaughtered by the thugs. Afro watches as his new family is cut down one by one until only he, his wounded master, and most of Gino are left standing. The master tells Afro to make his decision on the type of life that he wants, because the second he takes this headband from him, he will only know a life of misery, loneliness, and violence. And Afro thinks about it for a second, then basically says,
You know, I was thinking about that. And the thing is, I really don't care.
And cuts his master down. I love that the master doesn't even try to fight back against Afro in this scene. I really like it because, one, he's most likely tired of fighting, not just from the insane frenzy he just got out of, but tired of a lifetime of violence and being hunted. 2, despite being such a skilled and ruthless swordsman, he probably doesn't have it in him to kill one of his best and favorite students. And 3, it also feels like he's telling Afro, okay, you really want this life? Then come and take it and find out for yourself how bad it is. It's your burden now. It's truly a subtle yet amazing moment in the show, and it's one that Gino does not forget. Afro becomes the hate-filled, revenge-driven maniac he is because a man took everything he cared about right in front of his face. Well, Afro ends up doing the same thing to Gino in this scene. Gino loses his entire family, technically for the second time because he was already orphaned. He loses his way of life he had become accustomed to. He loses his human body because of his major injuries. And he loses his best friend in Afro, all in the same night.
Tough break, nigga.
Gino basically becomes a reflection of Afro. He becomes another victim of the never-ending cycle of violence that Afro chooses to perpetuate. Eventually, the MT7 find Gino's body and rebuild him as a nearly unstoppable killing machine in their hopes to take out Afro and claim the number 2 headband for themselves. But Gino isn't in it for the headband, just like how Afro isn't in it for the headband. Gino just wants revenge on number 2, the same way Afro wants revenge on number 1. Cycles of violence. The full fight between Afro and Gino is actually pretty good, but the ending is a little anticlimactic. Like, Gino doesn't really get a chance to say anything meaningful or sentimental to Afro as he dies. He just kind of dies. And this is also the fight where Ninja sacrifices himself to save Afro, and I guess this can be interpreted as Afro casting aside his doubt, guilt, and other emotions connected to the pain he's brought to others just so that he can mentally get over the hump to beat Gino. But I don't know, because the show doesn't really make it clear what Ninja even is, so it's hard to fully dissect his death. It's still sad all the same though, because Ninja's death means that there's no more Ninja, and I am not okay with that. But after Afro defeats Gino, he finally moves on to face his most desired opponent, the owner of the number 1 headband and murderer of his father, Justice. I never read the Afro Samurai manga, but in the show and in some of the wiki information I read, it's hinted that Afro's father and Justice had some kind of relationship before the fight at the start of the show. It seems like they had a fundamental disagreement on how the power of the number 1 headband should be wielded. Afro's father believed that the owner should just hide the headband. That way, even though godlike power existed, there would be no face for people to aspire to kill in order to attain it. Then, all the violence would just stop. Justice believed that Afro's father's theory was wrong, because even without the knowledge of the headband, people still killed each other all the time. And just because people didn't know where the headband was, blind faith would still lead mankind down a violent path to ultimate power. And as an Afro samurai from a different show once said,
"Hope is irrational."
Justice believed that the owner of the number 1 headband should use the ultimate power to actively shape the world to be a better place. To Justice, having the potential to change the world but never acting to realize that potential was the greatest sin. In more direct terms, Afro's father seemed to believe the natural goodness of humanity would eventually win out, whereas Justice believed that human nature would eventually destroy humanity if left unchecked. And I gotta say, I kinda agree more with Justice on this one. Not all people are bad, but it doesn't take many people who are bad to fuck up everything for everyone else. Government and rule of law can be oppressive, even if it's not inherently meant to be. But, and I can't believe I'm saying this on record, government and rule of law is absolutely necessary to keep society together. Justice's beliefs might be extreme and at their core rooted in selfish desires for ultimate power, but I do think a world where peace is forced upon humanity would be better than a world of unchecked chaos and disorder. But what I really love about all this is that in this final showdown, Justice takes the time to eloquently spew all of this philosophical and existential mumbo jumbo at Afro. And once he's done talking, Afro's just like, "I don't give a fuck. You killed my father and I want that shit back in blood. Stop all that talking and let's get to it." It makes me think about how Afro was described in the very first episode. A man who doesn't care about making the world a better place. He just wants revenge. Afro is a very unique main character in a lot of ways, most obviously his look, but his core motivations and almost complete disinterest in what's right or wrong is really what makes him stand out to me as a protagonist. Afro and Justice go on to have a short yet intense fight that's very similar to the fight Afro's father had with Justice in the beginning of the show, only this time, the Afro Samurai comes out on top. We get a many years later time skip, and we see Gino and Afro meet at the same place Justice and Afro's father met at the start of the story. And just like the generation before them, they fight for the right to own the number 1 headband. But just like the fight between the previous owners, it's not really about that. At its core, the fight is about revenge, and even more specifically, it's about cycles of violence that will never end as long as mankind is incapable of letting go of the pain that this world has caused them. So with all of that considered, I think it's fair to call Afro Samurai a tragedy that ends on a fittingly tragic note. But things could never be happy for Afro, not after everything he had done. One of my favorite lines from the show is when Gino tells Afro, "Kill or die, there is no going back." Sometimes we make decisions that make us question ourselves and our choices, but unfortunately, we've gone too far to make up for them. We just have to keep going and live with whatever the result may be. It might be hard to recognize when these kinds of choices are presented to you, choices that could drastically alter your life as well as the lives of others around you. But when you do recognize these moments, think about what's really important. Think about how your decision will affect you in the long term, not just in the present. Try to keep a cool head and a clear mind. In short, think like a samurai and try to walk the righteous and enlightened path. And that's Afro Samurai. Well, the 5-episode miniseries. There's apparently much more to the story in the movies and the manga, but I really do think this 5-episode season does more than enough to display just how great of a piece of art that Afro Samurai is. It's a truly unique and unforgettable show, and I'm glad I finally was able to watch it as an adult, but I really wish I would have watched it as a kid, because if 20-something-year-old me liked this show this much, then I know 13-year-old me would have eaten this up. But let me know in the comments below if there's anything, any show or movie that you want me to make a video about. You never know, I might just do it next, but either way, I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.